Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Book Blather. If you're new here, I'm Dave. This is Olive. Olive's in a little bit better mood because her haircut is starting to grow in. So we mostly talk about books and some little TV and movies. On that note, last video we discussed a movie that we recently discovered that was very similar to the graphic novel Crossed. And we mentioned had just learned about it, and so we mentioned we were going to go on a hunt to see if there were other movies in a similar vein. And so we have been diligently doing that, and we've gone through a number, and so we'll be doing a video on that shortly to follow up. But in the meantime, we wanted to kind of get caught up on the books that we've read recently that we haven't yet discussed yet. So today, we wanted to talk about two books. These are two classics that both have to do with sort of human hybrids. A hybrid's not the perfect word. There is no perfect word to collectively describe the theme of these two books. But they both involve basically a human transforming into something else, or something else transforming into a human. So these are both classics, whether you call them sci-fi or horror or who knows what. Who cares? They kind of defy the genre a little bit of both of those things. But but they're both very, very old and both somewhat loved classic stories. So the first one is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. So this is really, really old. He wrote this around the same time that he wrote his famous The Time Machine. This was originally published in 1896. And this story follows our main character, Prendick. And it's kind of told from Prendick's point of view. And he is a victim of a shipwreck. And he is rescued by this guy, Montgomery, and it's not Montgomery's boat. But Montgomery is traveling on a boat, and he rescues him and brings him on the boat. And when Montgomery is getting left off at a remote, secret island, the island of Dr. Moreau. And Prendick, the captain of the boat, won't let Prendick stay there and kind of cast Prendick off, so Montgomery ends up reluctantly taking him to the island. And on this island is the famous Dr. Moreau. And, we learn in the story that Dr. Moreau is basically a shamed, cast-off mad scientist, basically, from the mainland. And he had been doing some questionable experiments, and so he was disgraced, and he has now gone to this island where he can continue his scientific endeavors. And Montgomery is there with him. Montgomery was bringing some animals to the island, and during Prendick's stay, they're not really happy he's there, but they let him stay there. And Prendick discovers, certain things while he's there. He starts seeing, even right on the boat, he meets an individual that doesn't seem quite like a normal person, and then when he gets to the island and he's staying in this extra room on the island, he encounters some other things. So I don't want to spoil the whole story, but I think probably the gist of the story is well known, which is that Dr. Moreau is performing experiments on animals to try to give them human characteristics. And so these animals, or these beast folk, they're called, they kind of, there's a number of things, they have a number of different laws that they are supposed to follow, and they're supposed to restrain their behavior in certain ways, kind of to force them to behave in ways that are not consistent with their nature, and to make them more human-like and civilized. And so, our main character, Prendick, meets different ones of these characters, some of who, is fine, went from a servant to some which are having some problems, and ends up meeting a number of people out in the woods while he's there on the island. And I guess I won't say too much more than that, but it's really, it was a really interesting story. It's a science fiction story based on, what I just described, but it is also very much a horror story, because there is a number of chases going on, involving Prendick, and there is some there are a number of fearful moments because you're meeting these changed individuals, and you don't know how any of them are going to behave or what their motives are. So there are some scary segments of the book. It's not the scariest story I've ever read, but it was pretty good. So it's kind of like a blend of those genres, and of course it has these sort of this book was published a very long time ago, so like a lot of H.G. Wells stuff, it was a little bit ahead of its time, but it was sort of a very you know basic exploration of this sort of scientific experimentation, and the ethics behind that, and sort of the god complex behind that. All these beast folk kind of look at Dr. Moreau as like a god because he is their creator, but he is actually a scientist, right? And he is engaging in science that he likely should not be engaging in, according to probably most people's point of view. So, a few different themes, explored in the book, and it was an interesting, it was a neat little ride, both from the science fiction side and from the horror side. So, we didn't absolutely love it. We had a vague familiarity with the story already before we read it because it's so old. And maybe that took a little bit of away. So we didn't absolutely love it, but it was a good book. It's a classic that's worth reading. It's worth experiencing, and we'd recommend trying it out if you like that sort of thing. Okay, the other book that we read in this vein is also a classic, and this is a novella called The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. And so basically what happens in this story is there's not too, there are some extra characters, not too many characters in this, but basically it follows our main character Gregor. And he lives in, is described as like a small apartment with his parents and his sister, Greta. I think that's how you pronounce it, Greta. And Gregor is really kind of the one that takes care of the family. The father is older, and I think he had some debt, and so he's Gregor's really like the one that really he has a good job as a salesman and really provides for the family. And then one morning, this happens right in the beginning. So one morning, Gregor wakes up as an insect, and so it's you could approach the story in different ways. So he wakes up as an insect, and this causes a lot of problems, of course. First of all, it causes problems just physically, like he can barely even move, and it's a lot of effort to figure out how to even maneuver his body. But then also, once his family sees what has happened, they are shocked. He doesn't show up for work. Again, this all happens right in the beginning. He doesn't show up for work. And so somebody from his employment comes to check on him. And so, everybody is shocked, including his family is shocked. His mother, can't even deal with it. And so they don't know why this has happened or what to do about it. And so, a lot of Kafka's stuff, it's, you can kind of look at this as really, it's sort of just like a surreal, surreal environment and events that are happening. But it also, as you're reading the story, it's one of these stories where you're like, well, this is a metaphor or allegory for something, right? And so that, though, I've discovered, is open to a lot of interpretation. So, as you go through this story, it creates a lot of difficulty for his family because he's no longer able to go to work and he's not able to provide for them. So basically, his father has to go back to work. His sister initially starts to do a lot to try to take care of him and watch out for him. But this is all very strange for them. And there are some other characters that come in the mix. They get some couple tenants because now they need money. They also have a maid that comes in periodically at one point. And so you do see these ancillary characters. Sorry about that. Somebody came home. I got up for 1 second to double check, and I come back to find somebody immediately scooping up all their snacks over here on the table. So there's one left. So anyway, sorry about that. So a lot changes for this family, because not in for one thing, because Gregor is no longer able to provide for them, so it changes their lives in that sense. But also because they are not sure how to deal with him, and he has becomes a big burden. He makes them uncomfortable. It's burdensome to try to take care of him and keep him contained when there are other people. So I don't want to give too much away, but so basically, this was as I was reading this story, my interpretation right away was that I assumed that this was a metaphor for some other transition that Gregor was going through. I thought because there was a big impact on his physical body, and just his inability to work or function as well anymore. I thought either that he was, experiencing and maybe this is the case, I don't know, but that he was either experiencing like significant substance abuse or else an illness, that was, physically and mentally impacting him significantly. That was what I had assumed that was going through the story. Afterwards, because it's sort of surreal and a lot is left open to interpretation, I did go look what other people said about this story afterwards, and I didn't see anybody saying that, having that interpretation. So I don't know. I think there's a lot left to be interpreted in this story, but I think the main thing, whatever you feel about Gregor, whether this was a metaphor for something that he was actually going through, or this is just sort of like just this, surreal, fantastical idea that appears in some of Kafka's stories that, he just was transformed into an insect, just to explore the effects that it has, on individuals and society. However you perceive that piece of it. I think the point of it is that it sort of really explores that he goes through this physical metamorphosis, and as a result of that, his family goes through a very different kind of metamorphosis. It fundamentally changes the entire way in which his family lives. And that evolves throughout the story and changes as they learn, as they are going through this metamorphosis. So I think, to me, the title Metamorphosis, I don't know if this is what was intended or not, but to me the title Metamorphosis was sort of like, had a double meaning. And it was both Gregor's metamorphosis physically, but also the metamorphosis of the family that happens as a result. That seemed to be some of what this story was exploring, or a lot of what it was exploring. So this was also a good book. It was, a short read, so we would definitely recommend this. And I think, it's one that definitely, once again, I'm not a huge fan of stories that are open to interpretation. But this one was sort of interesting because it was so surreal. There's really just like a lot of different pieces that you can think about what's really being said or what's being explored here. So I would recommend giving it a try. So that's it. We read, those are the two books we wanted to talk about today. The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells and The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. So if you've read these books, let us know. Let us know what your thoughts are on them, especially Metamorphosis. If you have a certain interpretation, we'd love to hear it. Or if you plan to read any of them, let us know. We always love to hear from you guys. We will be back very soon with we have a few more things to talk about. That almost catches us up. There's like one other book that we have completed recently that we didn't talk about yet. But we're gonna save that for something else, I think. So other than that, we're all caught up with the books that we've completed. We're in the middle of a few books, so we'll be talking about those soon, as well as some other things that we wanted to discuss. So thanks so much for watching. As always, guys, we'll see you again very soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves. You can have the last one. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.